In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no Sunday, not for Keth Valdris, not for the billions who call Hive Secundus home, not for countless souls who have never glimpsed the sky their ancestors once knew, buried as they are beneath kilometers of rust-stained metal and perpetual shadow. The alarm's metallic shriek cuts through the darkness like a blade, dragging Keth from dreams he cannot remember into a reality he cannot escape. Around him, in the communal sleeping quarters, dozens of other forms stir in their narrow bunks, pale shapes moving through air, thick with recycled breath and industrial moisture. The darkness is not complete, it never is in the hive, but illuminated only by the sickly amber glow of emergency lumens and the distant flicker of forge fires that never sleep. Keth's feet find the cold metal floor, a sensation so familiar it barely registers. Like his father before him, and his father's father stretching back through generations, he has never known the touch of earth or grass, never felt natural sunlight warm his skin. The concept exists only in ancient texts and imperial propaganda, promises of an emperor's light that seems as distant and mythical as the stars themselves. He moves through the morning ritual. If morning has meaning in a world where time is measured, not by celestial movement, but by shift changes and productivity quotas. Cold, recycled water from communal basins, a ration bar that tastes of protein paste and synthetic nutrients, the donning of work clothes that have never seen natural light to fade their drab gray uniformity. Around him, others perform the same movements, a choreographed dance of survival perfected over centuries of lightless living. The manufactorum awaits, a cathedral of industry where Keth has spent most of his adult life. The ceiling disappears into shadow overhead, supported by pillars thick as hab blocks, while the floor stretches away into dimness punctuated by islands of harsh artificial calm light. Here, beneath the weight of an entire city, he tends to machines whose purpose he barely understands, maintaining systems that keep millions alive in their vertical tomb. But on this day, routine fractures. A malfunction in Sector 7 Gamma sends Keth into the deeper regions of the manufactorum, areas sealed off since his grandfather's time. The work orders are simple enough: trace a failing power conduit and restore function to a bank of atmospheric processors. But as his lamp beam cuts through the absolute darkness of the abandoned section, illuminating walls that weep with condensation and floors carpeted with the detritus of decades, Keth discovers something that should not exist. The wall gives way under his tools with unexpected ease, revealing not solid metal but a hollow space beyond. His light beam penetrates the gap, and what he sees defies understanding. A chamber, perfectly preserved, filled with devices whose elegant curves and unblemished surfaces speak of technologies beyond current imperial capabilities. And from these devices emanates something Keth has no word for, a light unlike any he has ever experienced. Not the harsh glare of work lumens or the red glow of heat vents, but something warm and golden, something that seems to reach not just his eyes but his very soul. He stands transfixed at the threshold, feeling sensations he cannot name. His pulse quickens, his breathing deepens, and for the first time in his life, the darkness around him feels oppressive rather than natural. The first exposure lasts only minutes before duty calls him back to the manufactorum proper, but those minutes change everything. The familiar amber twilight of his world now seems sickly and wrong. The faces of his fellow workers appear pale and strained in ways he never noticed before. The air itself tastes stale, processed, dead. He completes his shift mechanically, his mind consumed by the memory of that impossible light, night, defined by the dimming of work lumens rather than any natural cycle, finds Keth unable to sleep. He lies on his bunk, staring into the darkness above, haunted by sensations his mind struggles to process. Something fundamental has shifted in his understanding of existence. The darkness that once comforted now feels like a weight pressing down upon him, and he realizes with growing horror that he cannot return to the ignorance of the morning. Days pass. Keth's work performance suffers, as his thoughts drift constantly to the hidden chamber. He begins making excuses to work in Sector 7 Gamma, spending longer periods in that forgotten space, exposing himself to the mysterious light. Each session brings new revelations and new torments. His night vision, always sharp by necessity, becomes almost supernatural. His skin, naturally pale from generations of sun deprivation, grows nearly translucent, veins visible beneath its surface. Most disturbing of all, his eyes begin to show a faint luminescence in absolute darkness, a sign that would mark him as mutant to any who noticed. The light is changing him, and he is powerless to stop it. More than powerless, unwilling to stop it. For with each exposure comes not just physical transformation but psychological revelation. He begins to understand concepts that have no words in Hive cant: beauty, warmth, hope. The artificial illumination has shown him what his species has lost, what billions of souls endure without ever knowing they suffer. But knowledge, as the ancient texts warn, brings responsibility, and responsibility brings anguish. Keth watches his fellow workers moving through their routines, sees their acceptance of twilight existence, their adaptation to eternal dimness, and feels the growing weight of terrible understanding. They suffer from deprivations they cannot name, live lives diminished in ways they cannot comprehend. Their pale faces speak of vitamin deficiencies that artificial supplements cannot fully address. Their stooped postures reflect psychological burdens as much as physical labor. They are dying slowly, generation by generation, becoming less human with each cycle of lightless birth and shadow-shrouded death. Yet how can he share this revelation? How does one explain color to the blind, warmth to those who have known only cold, recycled air? How does one describe the psychological transformation that comes with true illumination without sounding like a heretic preaching forbidden truths? The answer comes in the worst possible way. During a routine shift, while his attention wanders to thoughts of golden light, Keth's hand slips on a control mechanism. The error is minor, easily corrected, but in the moment of distraction his eyes flare with their new inner light. The worker beside him, a woman named Sarah who has labored at the same station for 15 years, sees the unnatural glow and recoils in terror. Word spreads with the efficiency of a viral infection. Whispers follow Keth through the manufactorum corridors, co-workers edge away from his station, supervisors begin watching him with suspicious eyes. Within days, the arbitrators arrive, black armored figures whose authority derives from the highest levels of Hive command, men who deal with threats to imperial order with final solutions. Hauled before Arbitrator Sergeant Grimm in a chamber lit by harsh interrogation lumens that now cause Keth physical pain, he faces charges of suspected mutation and potential heresy. The evidence is undeniable. His eyes glow with unnatural light, his skin shows signs of unknown physiological changes, and multiple witnesses attest to his increasingly erratic behavior. In the Imperium of mankind, such symptoms carry only one verdict. Faced with execution, Keth makes the choice that will define not just his fate, but the fate of others yet unborn. He reveals the hidden chamber, leads the arbitrators through the forgotten sections of the manufactorum, shows them the impossible technology that has transformed him. The golden light spills out as the ancient devices activate, illuminating faces that have never known such radiance. The arbitrator's reaction is not what Keth expected. Rather than wonder or revelation, he sees fear, not fear of mutation or heresy, but fear of knowledge. These men understand immediately what he has discovered, and more importantly, they understand what it means. The perpetual darkness of the Hive is not simply the result of industrial necessity or atmospheric conditions, it is policy. Arbitrator Sergeant Grimm studies the ancient light generators with the expression of a man contemplating catastrophe. These devices represent technology from the Dark Age, capabilities that could revolutionize Hive living conditions, improve health and productivity, potentially extend human lifespan and capability. They also represent the greatest threat to social order the Hive has ever faced. For in the darkness, people accept their station. In the shadows, the rigid hierarchy of Hive society maintains stability. The masses labor without question, sleep without dreams of better existence, live and die without understanding the scope of their imprisonment. Light would change everything. Light would show them what they are, what they could be, what they have been denied. Light would bring revolution. The chamber is sealed within hours. The ancient devices are removed by tech marines, whose authority supersedes even the arbitrators. Keth disappears into the administrative machinery of the Hive, processed through levels of bureaucracy that exist to handle exactly such problems, but he does not die, and he does not return to his former life. Instead, Keth Valdris becomes something new, a light touched, a being transformed by forbidden illumination, caught between two worlds and fully belonging to neither. His official records list him as deceased, victim of an industrial accident in Sector 7 Gamma, but in the deeper reaches of the Hive, in forgotten tunnels and abandoned chambers, whispers speak of a pale figure who carries light within himself, who offers glimpses of what lies beyond the eternal twilight. The transformation is irreversible and total. Keth's enhanced vision allows him to navigate the absolute darkness of the deepest Hive levels, but exposure to normal artificial lighting now causes him agony. His bioluminescent markers make him visible to others like him, for he is not alone. Throughout the Hive's history, others have discovered fragments of ancient light technology, undergone similar transformations, learned to live in the margins between shadow and illumination. They form an underground network of the light-touched, individuals who have sacrificed their place in normal society for knowledge that cannot be unlearned. They preserve fragments of the technology when possible, offer guidance to those beginning to question the necessity of darkness, and maintain the dangerous hope that someday their transformation will serve a greater purpose. Keth learns the true scope of the system he has challenged. The perpetual darkness of Hive Worlds serves multiple functions in Imperial design. It maintains population control by ensuring citizens cannot comprehend the true scale of their numbers or their imprisonment. It reduces resource consumption by limiting the infrastructure needed for full illumination. Most importantly, it maintains psychological control by preventing the masses from developing concepts of beauty, aspiration, or hope that might destabilize social order. The architecture of control extends beyond mere lighting. The vertical nature of Hive cities ensures that access to natural light becomes a privilege of elevation, literally and figuratively. Those in the Underhive exist in near total darkness, their lives brutal and short. The Mid-Hive, where Keth once labored, receives minimal artificial illumination sufficient for basic function. The Upper Hive enjoys bright artificial lighting that mimics natural conditions. And at the very peak, in the spire, the elite bask in actual sunlight, their elevated position placing them above the industrial shroud that blankets the lower levels. Light becomes the ultimate currency of power, and its distribution the ultimate tool of oppression. Yet Keth's transformation has shown him that this system is not invulnerable. The ancient technologies still exist, hidden throughout the Hive's structure, waiting for those bold enough to seek them. Each discovery creates another light-touched, another individual who cannot return to comfortable ignorance, another thread in a growing network of illuminated descent. Years pass. Keth ages in the shadows, his body adapting further to his liminal existence. His skin becomes nearly transparent, his eyes pools of soft luminescence, his movements adapted to spaces where others cannot see. He becomes a guide for those who begin to question their dark existence, teaching them to find meaning in partial illumination while warning them of the price such knowledge demands. The network grows slowly, carefully. New initiates are chosen with extreme caution, for the authorities have not forgotten the threat that light represents. Surveillance increases in sectors where light-seeking behavior is detected. Punishments for possession of unauthorized illumination devices become more severe. The darkness is defended as zealously as any fortress, its maintenance a priority of Imperial governance. But the knowledge spreads nonetheless, carried in whispered conversations and shared dreams. Workers begin to question why their ancestors accepted such conditions. Families preserve stories of the light-touched, passing them down as myths and legends that carry dangerous truths. The very act of imagining light becomes a form of rebellion, a psychological revolution that authorities cannot fully suppress. Keth's legacy transcends his individual transformation. He has become a symbol of the possibility that exists beyond accepted limitations, proof that human potential extends beyond the boundaries imposed by those who rule from positions of privilege. His story spreads through the Hive's population like light itself, slowly, carefully, but inexorably, illuminating minds long resigned to darkness. The authorities respond with increased restrictions and harsher punishments, but also with a recognition that the system they defend is more fragile than once believed. New technologies are deployed to detect unauthorized light sources. Psychological conditioning programs are implemented to reinforce acceptance of twilight existence. The very act of looking upward becomes suspect, monitored by surveillance systems designed to identify those who might dream of ascension. Yet in the deepest places of the Hive, where even the arbitrators fear to venture, the light-touched continue their work. They preserve fragments of ancient technology, maintain knowledge of illumination techniques, and prepare for a future when their sacrifices might serve the liberation of others. They exist as living proof that transformation is possible, that the human spirit can adapt and transcend even the most carefully constructed limitations. Keth's final transformation is perhaps the most profound. No longer the frightened worker who stumbled upon forbidden technology, he becomes a teacher of hope in a universe that seems to offer none. He shows others that even in the grim darkness of the far future, light exists for those willing to pay the price to find it. His very existence becomes a challenge to the assertion that humanity must accept diminishment and oppression as the natural order. The true horror of Keth's story lies not in his transformation, but in the revelation of what that transformation means. Millions of souls labor in unnecessary darkness, their potential stunted by artificial limitations, their lives diminished by choices made by others centuries before their birth. They suffer deprivations they cannot name, accept restrictions they do not understand, and die without ever knowing what they might have become if given the chance to live in light. In the end, Keth Valdris represents both the greatest hope and the darkest truth of human existence in the 41st millennium. Hope, because his story proves that transformation and transcendence remain possible even in the most oppressive circumstances. Darkness, because it reveals the systematic nature of human diminishment, the careful architecture of control that keeps billions trapped in conditions far below their potential. His eyes, glowing softly in the eternal twilight of the hive, serve as both beacon and warning. They illuminate the possibility of better existence while revealing the price such knowledge demands. They offer hope to those ready to sacrifice everything for truth, while reminding others of what they lose when they choose to remain in comfortable darkness. And in the deep places of the hive, where shadow meets shadow, and the forgotten spaces hold ancient secrets, the light-touched continue their vigil. They preserve the possibility that someday, the darkness that has defined human existence for millennia might give way to something brighter. They maintain the dangerous knowledge that the current order is not inevitable, that change remains possible for those willing to pay its price. In the grim darkness of the far future, Keth Valdris learned, there is only war, but also, for those brave enough to seek it, there is light. And, sometimes, in a universe where hope itself is heresy, that knowledge is enough to sustain the human spirit through even the longest night. The perpetual darkness continues, as it has for millennia, as it may for millennia more. But within that darkness move figures touched by impossible light, carrying within themselves the memory of what humanity once was and the promise of what it might become again. They are the living proof that even in the 41st millennium, even in the depths of hive cities where the sun has never shone, the capacity for transformation endures. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying truth of all. Not that humanity suffers in darkness, but that it chooses to remain there when light lies within reach of those bold enough to grasp it.